Welcome into the Oregonian Sports Podcast, formerly Sports by Northwest. We're still getting used to that one over here. Maybe you are too. This is Bill Oram, sports columnist at the Oregonian and Oregon Live. Game week, as you know, if you listened to our podcast yesterday with Oregon Ducks beat writer James Crepea previewing Oregon versus Coach Prime in Colorado at Autzen Stadium. Today, we're moving a little bit up north, either north up I-5 to Corvallis or farther up north into the east to Pullman, talking Oregon State, Washington State with Beavers beat writer for the Oregonian and Oregon Live, Nick Daschel. Nick, how are you, good sir?
I'm good. I'm tired, a little tired from all the stuff today with, the Zoom call with all the presidents and ADs and all the reporting and all that stuff today. But, yeah, I'm good now.
For those who don't know or haven't been following this, Oregon State and Washington State, the two teams that have been left behind by the Pac-12 conference realignment has left them kicked to the curb, both in the top 25 playing on Saturday in Pullman. And I wrote this on Sunday, kind of anticipating this game week, that it would be, in one sense, this great battle between ranked teams, but in another, the backdrop for a pep rally on behalf of, the little guy of college football. And it seems like that's really what's happened, Nick. Can you tell us like some of the highlights of that Zoom call you're talking about where you had the president and AD of both schools meeting with local and national media?
Sure. It was Kirk Schultz, the president of Washington State, J.T. Murthy from Oregon State, the president of Oregon State, Pat Chun from Washington State, the AD, and Scott Barnes, AD at Oregon State. And, they started with a couple of opening statements, and then it was a solid hour of reporters asking questions about, pretty much everything related to Oregon State realignment and, relegation and, the court deal, everything. I don't know that we learned, a ton, partially because the thing is so still tied up with the legal battle that, there's just not really anything they can say in terms of, if this happens, then we'll do this and blah, blah, blah. They need to find out what the assets are first before they can really move forward. But, it was decidedly, Jathy was really, she was probably the most interesting one.
Hold on, Nick. I've got to stop you right there, because we learned this week that reporters are not allowed to call university presidents by their first name, didn't we? Isn't that what we learned from the USC fiasco with my friend Luca Evans at the Orange County Register? Got banned for, among other things, calling Carol Folt at USC Carol. I just want you to be careful, because Nick, we need you too much to go around getting your credentials revoked.
You mean like if I was down at Oregon this week and I didn't call him Coach Prime?
Exactly.
He must be called Coach and things like that. No, I kind of get the doctor thing. To me, doctor, it's sort of an earned title. The coach thing, I never have understood. I don't call anybody coach. I call him their first name, but regardless.
Not my coach.
Yeah, well.
Well, I interrupted your flow, Nick, and I apologize for that. But man, I had a chance to get my shots in at bad PR.
I can't remember what I was even talking about. But I was talking about how Murthy was. She still is really trying to somewhat rally the fan base with her outrage over this, what's happened to Oregon State, and I think fans like it at some point. They need to hear some solutions, but she is still definitely on this. We've been wronged, and our school deserves better, and we've proven we belong, and by God, it's those sorts of things. But I'm trying to remember what I did feel like. I felt like the one thing I learned a little bit is that there is a possibility that the Oregon State rivalry might happen. Maybe. A month ago I would have said no way. They're determined. They're just too. The feelings were just so. The emotions were just so badly wounded and whatnot. Now
Sure.
I think they're starting to think, this really needs to be a business decision. It makes sense for our athletes to play, regional type games. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying I just felt like the stance was softened a little bit on the Oregon State side of things.
So, Nick, some things that have stood out to me this week prepping for the Oregon State Washington State matchup and the love fest sort of leading up to it, which will obviously have what I think we both expect to be a really good hard fought game on Saturday on the Palouse. You and I will both be there. But the thing that has stood out to me is just some of the ways that the solidarity and unity has been represented. And one of those is, this has been reported. We had a post on Oregon Live about it, about the flag, the old crimson flag for Washington State that I think we all know. They get it they get it on the screen at College Game Day every weekend. Well, they're flying the Oregon State flag the rest of this season as well, sort of as a show of solidarity. And then I learned today that the Washington State marching band is going to be playing the Oregon State fight song before the game on Saturday, which is not something you see every day. I guess I wonder how, Nick, fans should sort of watch this game, or like how fans should sort of process those dueling realities where Oregon State and Washington State are allies in one sense, obviously in court, which we've written about, trying to get access to the assets of the Pac-12 and trying to preserve the conference together. But also you got these top 25 teams. I mean, there is just something very interesting about this dueling dichotomy. If you're an Oregon State fan or a Washington State fan listening to this for that matter, how do you sort of balance those two things when Saturday comes?
I don't really think it's a problem. I honestly think once the game starts, I think people are going to root for their team, and I don't see them, feeling bad that Washington State lost or Oregon State lost or there was a good or bad play. They're going to root for their team. I just think once the game's over and before the game, they're kind of in the same boat. And
Right.
These fan bases have really always been kind of in a line with each other. They've dealt with Oregon State, the quote unquote superiority, at Oregon, and Washington even more so with Washington State. Oregon State have always felt like the I don't know, for lack of a better term, sort of the lunch bucket crowd, and they come from the agriculture areas of the state, a lot of their alums and whatnot. They've always just kind of been in a line with each other. They're both land grant schools. Murphy pointed that out a lot today, that these are small. These schools were built in small towns for a lot of the smaller town people to go to school there, and it just sort of always been a line. But I mean, it's kind of like, I guess maybe like, I don't know, I can't really think of a good example. I just think they're going to root for their team when the game's going on. But other than that, they feel good about each other for now.
Yeah.
Now, somebody brought this up to me, and I don't have a good answer for this, but somebody responded to me on Twitter. Okay, what if some, this will never happen, of course, but let's just say the Big Ten said the winner of this game gets into our conference. I mean, would Oregon State, would Oregon State or Washington State actually agree to that? I mean, do you think they might do? Do you think they would do that? That's I know, again, it would never happen. I'm just saying it's interesting. How far does your loyalty go in this situation, I guess?
Oh, I would think that you would absolutely play for the last spot in the Big Ten, right? If you're Oregon State and this, right? Is that the question?
I think you do, but all the posturing up until this point has been, hey, we don't want our athletes going, playing 3 time zones away and all the other stuff, but then I'm sure it would be spun as we had no other choice. We didn't choose to be in this situation, and we don't want to do this, but this is what's best for us now. But I'm just saying, I just wonder what how people
I
would
mean,
feel.
well, and I think, in my opinion, right? Like a lot of what the messaging from Oregon State and Washington State has been about wanting to preserve regional rivalries and, not valuing land grant schools and, small towns being left out in the cold. You know, Oregon State and Washington State would have been absolutely ecstatic to be in the Big Ten, especially once the conference was dissolving, right? Like they don't want to be in this position. The
Right.
Big Ten, it's kind of a, um, it's sort of a it's self defense out of necessity, right? Like that helps explain the situation they're in, right? And that they value regional rivalries. If Oregon State had a different option that was going to allow them to maintain, A5 status and play in a Power 5 conference, I mean, you would do what a lot of other schools have suddenly done and take the money. Oregon State's not more altruistic than any of these other schools in this situation. They just have been dealt the bad hand, so they get to kind of cry. I think the altruism. So I mean, there is a little bit of posturing here, and I think we all understand that. But okay, so let's talk about a couple elements of this game, and I think you highlighted these in your recent videos for Oregon Live, which can be seen on Instagram and TikTok and Yakbox or whatever else we do.
It's the only way my kids consume me. They don't read anything I write, but they find all the TikToks.
It's the only way your children ever see you, because you're so busy working the beat for the Oregonian and Oregon Live. And I guess I would also just highlight for our listeners here, Nick, that you don't just come at this with a really deep understanding and knowledge of Oregon State from your years covering them, but in past roles throughout your career, you have covered Washington State. You've covered Washington. You've been up and down those highways in Washington State. You've spent a lot of time in Pullman. So when you talk about the fan base at Washington State, like, you know what you're talking about. You have spent a lot of time on the Palouse.
Yeah, I covered Washington State from '96 to 2007. I mean, I was there for the Ryan Leaf both the Rose Bowl years. Washington State was there. No, I know that. I mean, I've probably been as many games at Martin Stadium in the last 20 years as I have Reser, probably.
So I just think that's important context for our listeners. But as it relates to this particular matchup, I know I was surprised to read that this is the first time that Oregon State and Washington State have met as ranked opponents. Which, just considering the success that the schools have had, it hasn't been sustained like Oregon or Utah, but the number of good teams that both schools have had over the last 25 years, I was surprised that they hadn't both been at this point in their seasons when they met before. So that's kind of surprising. Winding it back, last year, Oregon State beat Washington State 24-10 at Research Stadium. I want to say that was their first win over Wazoo in the last 8 tries. Nick, is that right?
It ended an 8-game losing streak.
And they haven't won at Martin Stadium since 2013.
Right.
So there's a lot of sort of momentum pushing against Oregon State here, but like, we're also talking about years where Oregon State wasn't beating many people at all. So it's not really an anomaly that they weren't beating Washington State. I mean, those were a lot of years where Oregon State was struggling against the entire conference. So 2 things, and we'll hit on these, and then we'll go and maybe circle back another day. But the most intriguing player for Oregon State on either side of the ball, I hate to go for the low-hanging fruit here, but it's DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback, transfer from Clemson. You look at him in the first 2 games, was out of this world. Looked like he belonged in that Heisman Trophy conversation from the Conference of Quarterbacks. Now, understood it was against San Jose State and UC Davis, but I mean, he looked even better than advertised. And then San Diego State, he was a little less impressive. Missed a lot of throws, had a couple of interceptions. Oregon State, wins over San Diego State pretty easily, but it wasn't the, just absolute rout that maybe people were expecting. Coming from Clemson, you heard about DJ, that there was good DJ and bad DJ. Just like at Auburn, there was good Bo and bad Bo. But, through 3 games, that San Diego State game felt like the first time we saw, the quote-unquote bad DJ. What has to happen for good DJ to be on the field on Saturday, and what happens to the Beavers if he's not?
Well, I'm not going to pin everything that happened last Saturday on DJ. Some of the receivers just didn't get open, and he was thrown into some pretty tight windows, and they just didn't connect. But he did miss some throws by quite a bit. Now, was he throwing the ball away? Was he missing the mark? I don't know. But he admitted, I got to play better, and Jonathan said he's got to play better, and everybody knows and there's no reason to believe he won't play better. Because he showed the first two games what he can do. He some of the receivers were hurt last week. I think they'll have their full complement back for this week. It's really got to start with really getting it going on the ground. Washington State has been pretty good against the run, but I mean, if they get Martinez going like he's been going in the first half of these games. That's just going to make DJ's job a lot easier. But the one thing I've been wondering with Oregon State is they really haven't worked the tight end much, except for a few throws to Jack Vellig. And I'm kind of wondering if they've been sort of, not really showing much there until conference play, because they got three guys, maybe even four with Riley Sharp, that in camp looked like they could get downfield and make some plays. And I haven't seen a lot of that yet. Now, I don't know if that's because they can't, or they just haven't shown it yet. I have a feeling that we haven't seen the entire package because of, there was no necessity to open up the playbook in the first three games. But if there's plays to be had, they better show up on Saturday, because they're going to need to show. Now, the other interesting aspect with this quarterback-wise is Jonathan's never had a backup like Aiden Childs, and you just have to always wonder, when would he say it's time to throw him out there and see what he can do, and when it's in a real crunch situation, if DJ's not getting it done.
That just feels like a real snake pit of a decision to me, because if I kind of feel like once you hand the keys over to Aiden Childs, it's hard to pull him back. And I know you're maybe talking about a series or two or some change of pace, or when things have really gone super sideways for Oregon State. But with a player like DJ who is frankly trying to get himself to the NFL, transferred to Oregon State. Kind of handpicked Oregon State, was one of the buzziest transfers in the transfer portal. This is all sort of stuff that doesn't matter on Saturdays, but I really do worry, if I'm Oregon State, if I take DJ out of that chair, am I really ready to go the rest of the season that way? Because, I mean, listen, this is somebody who approaches the game as a professional, and you like to think that, this wouldn't affect him permanently, but, do you lose a player like that if you bench him, or if you replace him because things have gone poorly in a single game? I don't see that. I see Aiden Childs, got a lot of reps in non-conference because there's an opportunity to sort of get him some free shots. I just don't. And I know we've talked about this offline, Nick. I just have a really hard time seeing Aiden Childs being handed this offense this season. Well, but I just think it'd have to be a very dire situation, and you'd have to have lost all faith in DJ.
I think Jonathan's track record has been he's sticking with the starter until he's injured, or it pretty much is just killing the offense. He really is only, over the 5 years, the only guy I can think of that he's pulled is Sam Neuer after the first game, and that was partially because it was so close between Neuer and Chance Nolan that Neuer just didn't play well against Purdue, and so it was an easy call. But I mean, there's been times when we've all thought, is Chance Nolan really the guy? He just kept rolling him out there every week, or Jake Luton, maybe he'd have a bad game a few years back or something like that, and do we go with another guy? And he's always stuck with the starters until they pretty much have to burn themselves out. So. Yeah, I don't think he'd move off of DJ until it was a desperate situation. But I mean, like I said, he's never had a guy number 2 like an Aiden Childs.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I guess I just everything you're saying and everything we know about DJ, it feels a little bit like a red herring to me. But
Yeah.
you're closer to the team, and I
No,
think
I'm
it's
not.
interesting.
I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting they do that. I just said. That's it's out there.
Some people are wondering. um, okay, so let's flip it to the other side of the ball because this Oregon State defense probably had the most success. Is that quite true? Had as much or more success than any other Washington State opponent last year at containing Cam Ward. And Cam Ward was a little bit of a sensation last year as a transfer from Incarnate Word, down in the FCS level, and transferred into Washington State and kind of lit the conference on fire. Right? He was awesome through the air. He's a little bit of an escape artist in the backfield. Really extends plays. Nearly beat Oregon at Martin Stadium. I think that was when he really kind of put himself on the map in the Pac-12 last year. He's back. Oregon State really kept him at bay last season. And if you look at his numbers from that game against the Beavs last year, 25 of 54, did throw for 345 yards. But again, he threw 54 times and completed only 46% of those passes, only threw for 1 touchdown. The Cougars only managed 10 points. You've sort of written about the possibility that this defense is maybe approaching the levels of last year's team, which of course makes me wonder, could they really do that to Cam Ward again?
It's approaching last year's defense in different ways. Their front is where it leads this defense this year. Last year it was the secondary and the inside linebackers. This year it's up front. Their line is really good. The outside linebacker group is really good. Those fronts 6 and 7, depending on whether in a nickel or not, they really can cause some trouble up front. My guess is they're going to look at Cam Ward a lot like they looked at Cordero from San Jose State, where they're not necessarily looking to sack him, but they're just trying to squeeze the pocket, make him throw, and keep him in there so he has to throw with pressure on him and see what happens. And now they're coming off a 6-sack game from last week, but I just think that's going to be sort of the strategy, is to make sure he doesn't get out, because he wants to move, but not necessarily to run. He just wants to keep moving until he can find somebody. And I think that's going to be the strategy, is to try to keep him contained.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think would give you confidence that Oregon State can do that is you look at the success they had against Cordero, who you mentioned, relative to what Cordero looked like a week earlier against USC. Now, San Jose State did not beat USC, but for about 2.5, 3 quarters, they kept it pretty interesting. And Cordero's running around, like a madman, basically like, I don't know, like a buzzing bee in the backfield, basically eluding tacklers and extending plays and making things happen. And he didn't get out and on the run at all against Oregon State, with the exception of, I think, really one play that kind of comes to mind for that game. You and I were both there. So to me, that is, that gives you hope that they can do it with a guy like Cam Ward. And the fact they had success last year doing it makes it even more plausible. What is one area where you think the Beavers are likely to struggle against Washington State?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I'm not saying they're going to struggle, but this will be by far the best defensive line that they've seen all year. And I mean, I don't know. Against the Path, they've given up 1 sack this year, and as Jim Mahalchik shot back at me, that's the worst stat in football. And he wants to see, I think he wants to see how they can defend a real pass rush. And Washington State's got one with Ron Stone. I mean, they're going to get after the quarterback. So, I mean, is DJ going to be bad DJ if he's under pressure all game long? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I would just say that's something to watch on Saturday, is how Oregon State, handles Washington State's pass rush. They also have some pretty good. They're also pretty good in the back end too, and I can see them using any number of blitzes and things like that to put even more pressure on Oregon State. So I mean that's something to watch. I don't. I want to also see what Damian Martinez does when he's asked to play a whole game. He hasn't really done that yet. He's played like a half a game. He cramped up at San Jose. He kind of came out early last week, and they got Fenwick some work. I mean, I want to see what happens when he's got 22, 24 carries, and can he really take over a game if he's given those sorts of opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, those are all really interesting thoughts, and I guess the thing that we haven't seen from Oregon State, this is by far the best opponent Oregon State has seen, and they knew that coming into the year. I mean, San Jose State was a little bit of an interesting early test, but in terms of how Jonathan Smith scripted what he wanted to do in a given week, he hasn't had to open up the playbook all the way to get to 3-0. I don't know exactly how Jake Dickert has handled his approach here, but I mean, they played Wisconsin in week 2, and to beat a ranked Wisconsin team, you're not holding a whole lot back, I don't think. So I do think that Oregon State is still sort of building up to their full complement of what they are. Maybe Washington State had to get there a little bit earlier, so maybe Oregon State has a little more to still a little bit more to reveal on Saturday. Nick, where are Beaver fans who are getting to Pullman on Friday before the game? Where do they need to eat? What do they need to see? I know that they've all been there before because they've gone every other year for 108 years. But since this is a big game, all eyes are on it. People want to be in Pullman on Saturday for the 4 p.m. kickoff. Is it 4 p.m. or 4:30? I'm going 4 p.m.
4 p.m.
4 p.m. kickoff at Martin Stadium. People want to be in Pullman, and they want to have a good time in Pullman. You are the dean of the land-grant University football beat in the Pacific Northwest. Give us the visitor's guide to Pullman, Washington.
Well, it's actually been a while since I've spent a lot of time in Pullman, so some of the stuff is, I don't know if it's still even open, but obviously the Coug is where people go to have a few beers. I'm always partial to Cella's, it's a pizza Italian restaurant with some great calzone. I got an email today from some there at Ferdinand's Ice Creamery on campus. That's a real popular stop, and what are they? I'm reading. Let's see. I'm reading here. Let's see. They're putting out. They're celebrating their 75th anniversary on Saturday, and they're putting out cracked pepper and chive ice cream. No, wait, that's cheese. Cracked pepper and chive cheese. But the first 75 customers in the store will receive a Ferdinand's brand ice cream scoop. So they're encouraging people to go there early and get there. But that's a real popular place, obviously. So
if you're interested in getting an ad read like Nick Daschel just gave Ferdinand's, please contact the advertising department, because we would like to get paid for that kind of publicity. Unlike the freebie Nick just gave Ferdinand's.
But some of us, like you and I, will not be in Pullman until we get to the game, because we're not into spending $500 a night at a hotel in Pullman, because there are not many rooms to be had in that place. So we'll be in Spokane.
When I was in high school and briefly flirted with the idea of attending Washington State University, I remember staying at the Holiday Inn Express before my campus tour. It was my first exposure to the Holiday Inn Express cookies in the evening around bedtime in the lobby, and it was delicious. And it's a memory I have.
That was when we used to go over there for camp. I'd take the kids with me, and they loved going to those hotels. The Holiday Inn Express and the Quality Inn across the street, because they always had the warm chocolate chip cookies at night, and so that was always they just loved. It was the only place I don't know, other than what the DoubleTree. I guess DoubleTree does cookies, I guess, but these were right out of the oven, hot with milk too. They always had milk to go with them. So, and I assume they still do that. I mean, why would you not?
They don't call him the best football writer in the state for nothing, folks. That's Nick Daschel. I'm Bill Oram. Thank you very much for joining us on this conversation on the, what do we call it? We got the 2-Pac championship, the Pac-2 championship, the Left Behind Bowl. What is your moniker for this game, Nick?
I don't know. It's still the Pac-12 to me, because it still is the Pac-12 until next year, till no more. I don't know.
You can't get wisdom like that everywhere, folks. All right, for Nick Daschel, I'm Bill Oram. We'll obviously be in Pullman on Saturday. Huge football weekend. Ducks have the Buffs, Beavs and Cougs, and we'll have it all at Oregon Live and be talking about it here on the podcast. No longer Sports by Northwest. Sad RIP, the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Bill Oram, Nick Daschel. We'll be back soon. Thank you for listening.